Welcome to the third episode to the third season of Third Song In. You're listening to Third Song In with Chris Derrickson and Tom Polachek.
All right, our topic for today's episode is story songs. Tom and I have been talking for the last couple of weeks, bemoaning the fact that our favorite titled episodes, Dancing with Architecture.
Dancing about architecture.
Maybe that's the problem, is I don't even know the title.
It may be it's just too hard to remember.
Dancing about architecture seem to be our lowest rated episodes, which when we're talking between 30 and 50, we're not talking big ratings. But that one, for whatever reason, continues. Those two, this would be our third one. This was scheduled to be our third episode of Dancing about Architecture. And we're turning it into Dancing to Story Songs, which isn't usually something you dance to. So today we've gone back pretty far for some of our recommendations to either artists who are fantastic at writing and singing story songs, or mostly it's some of our favorite story songs of all time. And this episode resulted in me having to get permission from Tom to use one of his artists, but I think I could have come up with 20 or 30 more for each of our recommendations. Tom and I are all about lyrics, and story songs to me are the best use of lyrics. There's some really great ones out there that we know about.
Yeah, I think you and I probably I don't know if this is fair to say. I think story songs are probably my favorite types of songs, and I'm sure that's what drew me to Americana music, alt country, or country music in general. Is just rife with great story songs. You don't get as many rock and roll story songs, although they exist. I feel like Foreigner has a couple, but it's like you said. I think we focus on lyrics so much that it's only natural that those would be the kind of performers that we would want to listen to, kind of songs we would want to listen to. And I love a good story song.
Me too. So let's get to it.
Yeah, so let's just dive into recommendations for this episode. And let's talk about our recommendations from then, our recommendations from now, as our listener. I was going to make a joke about how few listeners we have, but as our longtime listeners know, when we say recommendations from then, what we're meaning is anything before 2000. When we make a recommendation for now, we recommend some form of art, pop culture, what have you, from 2000 or after. For our 2 or 3 younger listeners, 2000 I'm sure seems a lot like then, but for us it feels like yesterday. So what is your recommendation with respect to the theme of story songs for then?
I'm recommending Guy Clark's Let 'Em Roll, and a specific version, the live version from his 1997. Did I get the number right? Yes, look at that.
I believe so. Yeah.
Live album Keepers. This one is probably my very favorite story song of all time. It's just it's like poetry in motion. There's some great uses of phrasing and everything else in the song. The story itself is about a guy who's had a hard life, working as an elevator man. I mean, nothing glamorous. Poor old guy. And it all traces back to him proposing marriage to a prostitute in Texas. She turned him down. And the rest of his life is just suffering through that lost love. And I mean, I think the best way to do this is to, actually quote some of the lines. And I mean, one of my favorite is the guy who's telling the story sitting down with this old guy, and they're sitting on a curb, and the old man says, "Every single day it gets a little bit harder to handle, and yet And then the lyrics go, and he lost the thread and his mind got cluttered and the words just rolled off down the gutter. It's just such a great imagery. And Guy Clark was a fantastic songwriter.
He's probably one of the best story songwriters, right? I mean, if you ask people who sing and, you know, who are known for doing those kind of songs, like Steve Earle, for example, you know, everybody points back to Guy Clark as being one of the best and one of the first to really pull it off.
And I'm going to do one more, and then I'll cut to the ending of the song. And now it's been 17 years right in line, and he ain't been straight none of the time. Too many days of fighting the weather, and too many nights of not being together. Then he pauses and he goes, so he died. And I mean, it's just and there was hardly anyone at his funeral except some lady in black way off to the side. And that's how he sings it. And a lot of this is talking. It's almost a talking song up until the very end, where you get to the refrain where it's let him roll, which is almost just the most uplifting part of the song. You know, she's never forgot him. It's just a fantastic song. If you not listen to it, all the versions are great. I just think that this live version on Keepers is the best. It's a really, really good song.
Yeah, I never got a chance to see him live. And he's one of the ones that I missed. You know, there's that list you keep that you want to see him before they die. And I unfortunately never saw Guy Clark live, because that is a great album, and it's a really good song. I have to agree. Makes you the part you talked about just at the end there makes me think about what I always think of as like the grandfather of story songs, which is Long Black Veil, which, you know, was a band. I always heard it from the band first, but of course it was around forever before that. And it, you know, that idea of the woman who's just kind of hanging around in that key. It's a little different story, of course, but it makes me think of that song, which could have easily been one of my recommendations as well.
Yeah, I did see Guy Clark once. I'm trying to now remember the four artists who sang together. It was one of those actually story song shows. It was Lyle Lovett, Guy Clark, John Hyatt, I think it was Joe Ely, shouted out something, and Guy Clark shut him down like that.
Is that right?
Yeah, he's I think a notorious grump, but I think in a good way. Like you said, he was that senior songwriter that everyone looked up to. You already mentioned some.
They all kind of respected him and, you know, gave him a lot of credit. I think, you know, anytime you see any of those guys perform live, it seems like they'll drop his name in the show, even, you know, if he has nothing to do with it specifically.
Yep.
So sorry, we'll start.
I was going to say, what's your recommendation?
My recommendation for then is actually, did you just mention Joe Ely? I think you did.
I did, but before you go too much further, this is the closest I've come to remembering. I'm giving Let 'Em Roll, the live version, 5 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream.
5 out of 5. I think that's justified.
Back to you and Joe Ely.
So my recommendation as a story song by a master of the story song is The Road Goes On Forever by Joe Ely. The one I'm recommending is from Love and Danger studio album from 1992. You know, it's a good story song when you see, or when you hear it referenced in other story songs. And one of my favorite things is that the refrain from Road Goes On Forever, which basically is the road goes on forever, the party never ends, is actually part of the lyrics of a Todd Snyder story song about going to a concert. It's not a Joe Ely concert, actually. He's talking about a Robert Earl Keen concert. And I believe Robert Earl Keen wrote this song. But to me, the key for these kind of songs is the detail. And Guy Clark was so good at the detail part of things. But this Robert Earl Keen song, which he did sing on an album, I can't recall the name, but Joe Ely performs live and also performed on the studio album. The amount of detail is just amazing to me. It starts with these 2 lines. Sherry was a waitress at the only joint in town. She had a reputation as a girl who'd been around. So you get the name of one of the main characters, and you just almost automatically now picture who this is. You've seen a woman like this, you know, working behind the counter or working as a waitress in a diner or whatever it may be. You can almost see her face just by a few lines of you know, the first lines of the lyrics. Later on in the song, he describes the other main character. It says, Sonny was a loner, older than the rest. He was going in the Navy, but couldn't pass the test. So he hung around town. He sold a little pot. The law caught wind of Sonny, and one day he got caught. So again, you get this picture of this loser who's in the diner, and the rest of the song is basically how they get together. To me, some of the best story songs are the outlaw story songs, and this is one of them. It ends with basically her selling Sonny out, and the last four lines in the song are: Sherry buys a paper and a cold 6-pack of beer. The headlines read that Sonny is going to the chair. She pulls back onto Main Street in her new Mercedes Benz. The road goes on forever and the party never ends. And every single verse of this song is just a chapter of the story of these two, from when they met to when he goes down for the crime and she drives away in her new car. And I can't think of a better recommendation from then as a story song than that particular song. And again, you can hear it performed probably by 4 or 5 different artists if you look it up and or Google it. But I do think that the Joe Ely version he just adds so much to the lyrics by virtue of how his voice and the way he delivers the lyrics themselves.
Agree completely. On all accounts, it's one of the best story songs. I think Joe Ely's version is the best. I think he does a great live version as well, which was my first introduction to that song. I did see him live and saw him perform it. That was one of the many that I could have chosen, and I think that's another one that's just fantastic. Like you said, the details are good.
I'm sorry. Didn't he perform? Wasn't that on Live at Liberty Lunch as well?
Yes.
Yeah. I think you bought that album. I think the first time I ever heard the song was on that live album.
Yeah, and there's similar songs like Steve Earle has one where the older woman rats out the young kid who they went on a killing spree. I think it's more robbery spree, but on this one, Sonny tells her, if they catch you, tell her I made you do it, and she did. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, like I said, I think those outlaw songs are best for story songs. We were trying to come up from our perspective, talking before the show about something in our life that would make a good story song. And unfortunately, I don't think any of us is, other than maybe stealing a textbook in in college, I don't think any of us has done anything that really qualifies as outlaw behavior. So I'm not sure we'd be a good subject for a story song.
No. And we had a question from a Jonathan about a story, if our life was a story song, what would it be? And neither of us could come up with a story.
Yep. We're like, try again, Jonathan, need better questions. So my egg burritos with sour cream rating for The Road Goes On Forever is 5 out of 5. I can't imagine a better song than this, a better story song. It's probably tied with about 50 other ones, but it is absolutely fantastic by a great performer. So I'll give it 5 out of 5. And then moving on to my recommendation for now, which is anything after 2000. I'm recommending a film. It's relatively recent, came out in 2020. It's called Hard Luck Love Song, directed by a guy named Justin Corsby. The reason that I'm recommending it is that the entire film was written and based upon the music of one of my all-time favorite artists and great story song singers, Todd Snider. If you watch the movie, they drop lyrics from many of his songs as part of the dialogue, as kind of an homage to Todd Snider. But the movie itself is specifically based upon an awesome song called Just Like Old Times, which was originally recorded in 2006 in The Devil You Know by Todd Snider. And it is a story song about two people who I think loved each other when they were like in high school. And it's basically about how one of them has become an escort, if not actually a prostitute, and the other one has become a pool shark and travels around the country hustling pool. And it is fantastic, fantastic song. I almost just recommended the song, but then it occurred to me that this movie really interestingly bases its entire story on that song, and then, as I said, references all kinds of other songs of his through its lyrics. It stars a guy named Michael Dorman, Sophia Bush, she used to be in Chicago PD, I think. She's probably been off that series for 3 or 4 years. And then Dermot Mulroney plays kind of a bad guy, kind of a good guy, an interesting character in the movie. It's not the best film I've ever seen, and I would only give it 3 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream. But I want to recommend it only because I think it is so cool and kind of a cool reference homage to Todd Snyder, who I happen to love.
Yeah, and Todd Snyder's interesting because, again, I already said that I asked permission to use someone who I consider to be your find. And Todd Snyder, I associate with you so much that I actually don't listen to him that much. Not because of you. It's just that I don't want to really, I don't know why. I just don't. He's your guy. And you put his stuff on our playlist all the time. I like them. I've just never delved into them as much as you have. So.
Well, on the Todd Snyder tip, at least for a second, just because I don't remember if I told you this, but he has been re-releasing, or I should say re-recording every studio album he's ever made by himself, kind of independently releasing it, which I think is who did that? What's her name did that?
Taylor Swift. Boom.
Taylor Swift. There you go. He's doing what I believe Taylor Swift did, which was kind of reclaiming some of his music that was on, under contract, or, was he's got recordings that he probably doesn't even make money off of anymore. So he has been starting from his very first album, and once a month he releases for free, by the way, the entire album, except he just records it pretty much just solo acoustic, but he tells stories about each of the songs, which is what he does live in concert anyway. And it's amazing. It's going to be such a cool collection of music to have, because he's doing every single one of his studio albums, and he explains how he wrote the songs or where he was in his life. And it's kind of an autobiographical way of reclaiming all of his music. It's really cool.
It is cool. All right, I'm going to move on to my recommendation for now. This is the one that I had to ask Tom's permission for. He introduced me to Chris Knight, and I'm choosing his song from the 2001 album, A Pretty Good Guy. And the song that I chose is Down the River. And one of the things I found out about Tom and I is, if you do cross us, I think we both have a vengeful streak, because we love songs about revenge. And this one is one of the best, I think. It's fairly sparse in its detail, but it captures the hatred and the cold-hearted revenge of the narrator, as well as any song. So it's basically, they only drop a couple names in the song. It's the narrator's 18 and his brother's 21. They're going down the river to go fishing. His brother had picked a fight with a guy named Wilson. Wilson and his cousin go flying past them on the river. And then a little bit later down, there's a gunshot rings out. And the narrator sees his brother fall off the boat, and he can never find his brother. So the presumption is his brother was shot and killed by Wilson. And then the rest of the story is him plotting and tracking down Wilson first, killing him, tying him to an anvil, I think, so his body never surfaces. And he says 5 years later, it still never has. But I love the ending. He does say, the last verse, is, and I ain't done much fishing. I hardly wet a line. The death of my brother is still heavy on my mind. I've been thinking Wilson's cousin better find a place to hide, because I'm going down the river. Yeah, I'm going down the river. So he killed Wilson. He's going to finish the act by killing Wilson's cousin. And there's not a bit of me that feels bad about, like, this guy just cold-heartedly killing these two guys that did kill his brother. It's just a great song, and I could have chosen 2 or 3 other ones from that album. Becky's Bible is another great one, about a guy who shot someone during a card game and now has to hide. And he has Becky's Bible, to keep him company. That's his girlfriend. But yeah, Chris Knight's great. I haven't listened to much of his stuff lately, but this episode has now rekindled my interest. I'm going to go back and see what he's done more recently.
Yeah, actually, you're recommending him is rekindled that for me because there's also a great story song where basically they find a guy in a snowdrift, right? Or was it her? Somebody wanders away from the cabin
Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
he's more a traditional country performer, I would
yeah.
say, than what we refer to as Americana. But he's got a great ear for lyrics, and he sings a great story song. You're right. It's been a bit since I've listened to any Chris Knight, and I am later today gonna pull up an album and listen. Thank you.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for letting me use it.
So what is your Egg Burritos with Sour Cream rating for Down the River by Chris Knight?
I'm being pretty easy grader this week, but I'm giving Down the River 5 out of 5. I think it's just a stellar story song, and it's about revenge. You and I love revenge. Let's go.
So I think, although we turned down a question from a Jonathan because it was just too hard. Do we have any other questions from anybody out there?
Yeah, we do. We have a question from Jonathan who writes in from Dick Shooter, Idaho. I can't even say that with a straight face.
I know. I wish I could put that as my return address.
All right. So Jonathan from Dick Shooter, Idaho asks us, who is our favorite performer who does story songs?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say after listening to us talk for about the last 10 minutes or so that neither of us can really pick one favorite. I know I cannot. But I decided to reach back and pick somebody who in actuality is not my favorite, but has got to be lauded as one of the masters of telling the story song. And when I was a kid, my parents listened to him all the time, and it was amazing to me how practically every song he ever performed was a story, like a novel in and of itself. And that's Harry Chapin. He is, or was, he passed away some time ago. He would just pack them in back in the 70s. His style is a little too theatrical for me, and he's kind of a throwback, more to the 50s in some ways. And he's definitely a folk singer as opposed to, even pop music. He just barely edges into pop music, I think, because he's so folky. But his album, Greatest Stories Live, was just that. It was a live recording. He was I don't know where he was exactly where he performed. Actually, it looks like he recorded it over 3 nights at 3 different places in California, but it sounds like it was to a huge crowd. And it just song after song of these mostly sad, melancholy stories, including the one that he's most famous for, which is Cats in the Cradle. There's a song called WOLD about a guy who's a local DJ, radio DJ, and it's just the saddest, loneliest thing you've ever heard. Unless you listen to Mr. Tanner, which is another one about a sad, lonely guy who wants to be like a classical singer and has an audition in New York City unsuccessfully. It's just one after another of these frankly depressing story songs. But I used to listen to that album, by myself. When my parents weren't home, I'd put that album on the record player and listen to it all the way through once or twice, 3 times in a row sometimes, which probably explains a lot now that I think about it. But that's my answer to that question, only because he's, for me, the seminal writer and singer of story songs.
I'm getting kind of annoyed. I keep turning into a ghost.
I was wondering why your image keeps disappearing, and for some reason, even though I almost never look at the screen, if you're not up there, I'm very unsettled.
I know, it's very unsettling. I was going to use the same word. All right. I've gone back and forth on this one. Originally, I was going to do the Drive-By Truckers, as I told you. They have plenty of great story songs. They also tell some of the best stories leading into their songs. And you and I have seen them. I've seen them a couple times. You and I saw them down at Austin City Limits. And then it's like, well, that's a little too obvious. And I've talked about the Drive-By Truckers a lot. So then I flash back to a concert I saw years ago. Tim Easton, who's a great story teller. One of my favorite songs. You made that face, but that's not who I'm picking. I'm pulling a Tom. I'm going through my thought process
I
here.
love Tim Easton.
I do
That's another
too.
one.
I'm going to go back, but one of his songs is just the description of a fight, and I think the title is "Out of Your Life." But it talks about the woman storms out of the house, gets into the car to leave, and the line, and he says it over and over again, is she stepped on the pedal like it was his heart. It's just such a vivid image, and again, just the description of a fight. But I loved the process he described at the concert. Hallie wrote songs. I'm gonna go back and check him out, but that's not my recommendation or my answer. My answer is Mark Germino, who I'm surprised has never quite made it any bigger than he has. He's from North Carolina. He has released a newer album, 2021, released an album called Midnight Carnival. One of my favorite songs on there is just, it sort of captures his humor, because he's very insightful, but also very humorous in his songs. Is the greatest song ever recorded or something like that. And this songwriter has a goal of writing the greatest song ever. They don't. So they finally figure out a way to do so, is to name a song. The title of the song is the greatest song ever recorded. So they did write the greatest song ever recorded. But no, his songs from Radar Town and Rank and File, which are 1990 songs. I think I've mentioned some of his. The Exalted Rose is a great song about a woman who goes into a bar, talks to the bartender, has a deadbeat husband, and the bartender basically is like, why don't you just leave him? And she has this loyalty to him. It's just a great song. The ballad, I think, of The Rat and the Snake is more political, but I would recommend checking out those albums. He's a way underappreciated artist and songwriter. He apparently started as a poet, and you can tell in the various stories, songs that he writes.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like you and I are the only two people that listen to Mark Germino. And to be fair, I only listen to him because you introduced me to him. But I agree with you. He's great in general, and I forgot how many of his songs are kind of, those little short stories set to music.
Yep.
Although you made me think of one thing, somebody who either stole his thunder or maybe did it before. I don't, but I do know that Tenacious D also wrote the greatest song ever written or something like that. And I actually saw them perform that live. I saw, but a little different band, but still, I think the same idea.
A little different. I could see Mark Germino maybe opening up for him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He really is a great performer. Although I have not seen him live. Have you seen him? Did you just say you saw him live?
No, I've not seen him live. I'm thinking he's got to be up in age.
Yeah, that's true.
I need to do some snooping to figure out where he might be. I just know his biography that I can find online says he's from North Carolina, so I'm going on the assumption he's still around.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I'd have to figure that out.
Cool. I think that's a good response to that question. Like I said, I mean, I'm sure each of us could come up with a list of 10 performers that are all tied for first as far as story songs are concerned.
And I'm back in case you didn't notice. So if you want to see my face for the next few seconds.
And now I feel like you're just going to disappear again. So I don't even want to look at you. See, I just did. Son of a bitch. All right. So I would say that now takes us to our playlist picks. As our frequent listeners know, every episode we pick at least one song each to add to a playlist that you can find on various music streamers, including Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music. We've got now 3 separate playlists. They all start with Third Song In. This most recent one that we're adding to now is Third Song In Season 3. And we each try to pick a song that we feel fits the theme of the episode. And also we try to find songs that you may not have heard of before or listened to before. And I will give you my pick first. It's a band we've discussed in the past. It's not a song we've discussed. And it is the Pinball Song by Slobberbone from an album called Everything You Thought Was Right Was Wrong Today. And it is one of my all-time favorite story songs. And if you talk about a song that that includes a lot of detail, this is it. It's basically about how a guy who appears to be a musician hits on the girlfriend of his best friend, who happens to be in the drunk tank. And our guy gets back from the road. It goes to the bar they clearly, obviously go to. They start drinking. He goes home with her. He sleeps with her, and then he has to admit it and come clean to his buddy when his buddy gets out of the drunk tank on what I assume is a Monday morning. And then it talks about the physical fight they get into, and it's all kind of written and sung around this concept of being at this bar where there's a pinball machine, which they clearly play all the time. And it's just a great story. It's again, kind of depressing, but it's a great story song that makes you feel like you know each of the characters that are involved.
Great choice. That's one of my favorite songs as well for so many reasons. It's like you said, all the details, but even the way the music is, it seems a little flippant. The drunk tank references are so funny, especially when they talk about how they let them all out. Is it on Sunday morning or Monday morning? It's like opening a valve on a pipe and they all come flowing out.
Yeah, the very end of the song, I love the lyrics, and as you said, the music is so upbeat that the first time I heard the song, I don't think I realized what awful things were going on.
Right.
But it said the very last verse says, "Times used to be you and me could always match. Yeah, and the multi-ball came easy, just like the replay game, and the wagers won and tossed hard down the hatch. So now I nailed the free game, and there's a bottle across my head. My table tilts. I'm headed for the floor. Went out to find an old friend, but I lost me one instead. I lost it all for just another score." And it's like very depressing, but man, you can just feel you can feel the emotions and just the regret that this guy has.
Yeah.
And it's just so well done. It's really a great song.
Cannot agree more. Great choice. All right. I went in a slightly different direction. And just like Tom, I could have probably come up with 10 or 20 options here, but I went with one that I know brings a tear to poor Tom's eye. It's Holly Williams' song "Waiting on June." Holly Williams is the granddaughter of Hank Williams and the daughter of Hank Jr. But this song is written about her maternal grandparents and is pretty close to biographical from what I understand. So it's one of those epic songs, and there's quite a few of those. BJ Barham has a song called "The Unfortunate Kind" that reminds me of this a little bit. Scott Miller has a song called "Epic Love," which is also about someone who goes off to war and then comes back. Another great song. But I will focus on "Waiting on June." So it starts with this guy basically falling in love with his future wife when they're kids. He goes to kiss her and she grabs a baseball bat. She'll have none of that. He goes off to war. His best buddy dies in his arms, and his buddy, before he passes, makes him promise that he will go and marry June. Well, he does come back, he marries June, and then the rest is, them having kids and then grandkids. And the recurring theme is that no matter what, he's always waiting on June. While they're all sitting around at dinner, she takes twice as long as everyone to eat. But with actually having manners back then, everyone had to wait until she was done. When they're getting ready to go to church, he tells the kids to run ahead. He'll wait for June, and then they'll be there in less than 15 minutes or so. So just over and over again, waiting on June. I'm going to quote my favorite stanza. It's when they're in the nursing home, and he says, "We were slow," she says, but it's speaking through his eyes. "We were slower than we used to be. The nursing home told June and me that we'd have separate rooms side by side. Oh, what I'd give for one more night of sleeping with my wife. Since 45, I've touched her skin in the middle of the night. So I'm lying in the single bed until they cut the lights. That's when she'll sneak in and I'll be fine." So it's just that incredible love, and thinking about, aging and what it's, leading to, and the separation of these two lovers, and grandparents and parents. And in the end, as he dies, and once again, he's waiting for June, because she's still alive, missing him. And then the very end is No More Waiting on June. So obviously she passes as well, and they're reunited in heaven, according to the song. So
Yeah, that's the saddest fucking song I've ever heard. I can't listen to it very often. It gets me every time.
and it's a great song. I have only listened to a couple other Holly Williams songs. She delivers it beautifully. I mean, singing from the perspective of a man. Her grandfather is just it's made me appreciate her. But I've listened to a couple other of her songs. She's a little more straight country, like we talked about with Chris Knight, which I don't mind. I just
Mm-hmm.
but that one is just lights out. One of the best songs. It's a great song. I got to figure out another way to describe things other than great, but you know what?
Yeah,
I'm going with it.
just I'm gonna start having just have a thesaurus next to my monitor in case I need a word. But
Maybe what I should do is every time I say great, you have to do a shot. So
I don't know how that helps you. Put me under the table. I'm not sure that's fair. Yeah, yeah, we're basically talking about story songs and songs I think that tell a tale, within the four corners of that particular piece of music. I almost there's so many people that you can recommend that just also like the great storytellers that tell stories in between songs. We've talked a little bit about people like that. I just it it took me a long time to realize what's the word I'm trying to think of, how pop music can rises to the level of literature depending on who's performing, and not all of it, definitely not everybody, but some people just have an incredible way of conveying things. And to me, it's just, yeah, I'm impressed with someone who can write a short story or a novel that tells a story, but to be able to do it in 3 minutes and have it rhyme is amazing to me. And then when you hear people talk about how they wrote songs, and you realize that pretty much they just find one little thing and then they build on it, just like a novelist, just like a writer. It's truly impressive.
I agree, and I think often why others don't appreciate at least my music as much, because some of these songs are almost just talking to music,
Hmm.
and they're certainly not songs you would dance to, despite the possible title of this, "Dancing to Story Songs." But it's like you said, it's being able to capture those details that broaden the picture so quickly.
Yeah.
And some of these, it's like the Let 'Em Roll, they never mention his name. They only mention one name in the song, and that's the prostitute. Name is Alice. But you can envision those characters, or the characters in these story songs that are a really well done story song. You can envision them, and bring them to life in your head. And to me, that's an amazing skill, one that I wish I had. I struggle with writing a blog every couple weeks and trying to keep it fairly concise and get my point across. And like you said, some of these songs are 50, 60 words, and they're conveying some really deep, meaningful stories, at least in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. It is yet another thing to to be jealous of the
Yeah.
other musician for.
And now it's time for Post Facto.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
Where we correct any mistakes we made, any omissions we made, anything that was hard to understand, anything that we thought in our head only but never said out loud, stuff like that. This is usually Tom's big moment to shine.
I'm not sure shine is the right word. Yeah, so I do have a handful of things that need to either be corrected or clarified a little bit. I was corrected by my lovely wife, Dawn, when I told the story about being at the Joliet racetrack and watching a NASCAR race. She reminded me that, in fact, it was an IndyCar race, which doesn't make one fucking bit of difference in that story. But it was an IndyCar race, so I guess they were faster. I don't know. The cars look cooler, but it didn't change one thing about the story, and it was still boring as hell. Also, talking about that racetrack, I think I shortchanged them a little bit. I looked it up, and Joliet hosted a NASCAR race for 18 years. I thought it was closer to 10 or 12, and I certainly stopped paying attention after 2 or 3. But it was here for a long time, and it was only recently that they stopped racing here. And I don't know why, because it always seemed like we brought in 1 million people for that event. And then I also I mentioned David Zucker was the director of BASEketball, one of the movies I recommended in last episode, and he was the director. He was also the co-writer, and I was drawing a blank specifically what he was involved with previously, but he was also the writer-director of Airplane, Naked Gun, Top Secret, all really, really funny movies, and all similarly kind of just silly, stupid humor. So he's a great writer and director, and I kind of blanked a little bit on his resume when we were talking last week.
He may never listen to our podcast again.
I really pissed him
just
off.
Described his humor as silly, stupid.
So, yeah, well, I got to say, I'd love to talk to that guy because I feel like he might describe it that way. He certainly can't have any illusions about what he was making when he made the movie Airplane. God, I love that movie. That was a great flick. That was so good.
Looks like I picked a bad week to stop sniffing glue.
Exactly. Returning back to NASCAR stuff, I also mentioned that they were previously the Winston Cup, although I think that was quite a long time ago. When they were in Joliet, I think they were the Nextel Cup. At one point, they were the Sprint Cup, and also the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup. Currently, they just go by the NASCAR Cup Series, I guess. And again, considering the fact that I never watch it at all, I didn't know it, and I don't know why anybody would care.
So you're saying they were never called the Boring as Hell Cup?
They were not other than in my own head, I think. And then finally, this occurred to me as I was editing last week's episode, but I really should have put Engine Joe in the playlist. That was my perfect opportunity to slip them into this season's playlist, that song into this season's playlist, because Engine Joe, as the song describes, was actually a mechanic that fixed up race cars. So I'm really pissed because I think that would have really gotten under your skin if I had done that in the episode.
I'm starting to think you really don't like that song because you keep finding excuses not to use it.
Yeah, it's got to go in somewhere here in season 3. I'll figure out how to do it. Anyway, those are my post facto comments. What do you got?
I got nothing.
You son of a bitch. You just suck.
Well, unless you count all the mumbling, my poorly performing microphone, stuff like that. But otherwise, no factual errors that I'm aware of.
No mistakes ever. You just do not make mistakes. That's what it comes down to.
We'd love to hear from you. One way you can contact us is through email. Our email is thirdsongin@gmail.com. So any feedback, any recommendations, anything at all, we check that daily, and we'll respond, especially if it's nice, really quickly. If it's not so nice, maybe not as quickly, but we'd love to hear from you.
Look for our website. Chris, can you tell us about the website?
I can tell us about the website. Our website can be found at thirdsonginpodcast.com. Right from the opening page, you can find a link to the latest episode, to our latest blog. There's a variety of other information on there, including our weekly recommendations. We have an episode spotlight where we love to post little videos that are tied into the theme of the latest episode. Check out all the great Major League Baseball catches. I know Tom is watching that one on repeat. That's from our Bad Sports episode, which was last week.
We would ask that you follow us on whatever podcast platform that you listen to us on. Rate us, please. Give us all your stars. Review the podcast if you can. It'd be great if you could follow, rate, review, share our music playlist, which is Third Song In Season 3. You can find that on Spotify, on Apple Music, Amazon Music, and YouTube Music.
You've been listening to Third Song In with Tom and Chris. Thanks for listening. I got to go check out where my stars are and give them all to you.
Find your stars. Find your stars and fucking give them to us, will you? Don't make me come over there and take your stars. Why don't you just fuck off? You've been listening to Third Song In. Just fuck off.